Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a Baller.
Welcome in, boys and girls. It's Wednesday, June 28th here on the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I'm joined by Matthew Betz. And yes, he's back, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Wright.
I'm back, baby. What's up, everybody?
Mike, where you been, man?
Doing really important things, Mr.
Big
Betz.
moves?
Yeah, I don't know. I've just been gone. I've been gone. I had to cede my.
Don't worry about it, okay?
I had to give my seat up to Mr. Andrew Holloway, who he popped up like a groundhog and was like, "I'd like to do the Dynasty Pod," and I said, "Fine, I will give you my spot for a week, but then I'm going in next week, and I might even be back the following week. Double trouble with the Hitman."
Andy had to restrain himself the entire time.
Sure.
From not going into just full, type A mode. And I get it. I'm kind of a type A person. Mike, you can host. Betz, you've done hosting stuff before too. But on this podcast, we get to share. We get to share our thoughts with each other. And it took everything from Andy just to not do it. And then on the main show, he kind of tiptoed around if he was actually the host. Like, did he not want to say that, like that he was on the podcast?
It wasn't about hosting. That was about, we were trying to build up a big, billboard, name in the lights guest spot for the Dynasty Podcast.
But instead, it was just us. And it will be us. It will always be us. On this show, we're going to be talking about Dynasty startup tips. We got 10 hot tips that the three of us are going to give. We'll count those down for you. Betz and I are currently in the middle of a way too long Dynasty startup draft, so we'll kind of mix that in with the Foot Clan. Betz, do you understand why I made this thing 23 rounds when it was a mock?
I really don't. I am mostly confused by the fact that you didn't make it just a nice even number. I mean, if you're going to go 23, go 25, maybe just 20, maybe just 15 like a normal human being, but Kyle decides for 23 rounds. And if you've ever been in an actual startup, when you get to round like 23, 24, it's like, I don't know, man. I don't even know if this guy's going to be on the team next year. Imagine doing that in a mock draft. So thank you, Kyle, for this incredible experience with the Foot Clan.
I wanted a case study for the people when we're on this podcast to be able to talk about it. So I'm currently on the clock. I've got 3 hours. I'm going to milk it. I'm just going to, wait for that sweet Dynasty news that comes out in late June. Like, it's been honestly pretty quiet for the news cycle over the last week or two. I mean, maybe by the time you listen to this, we'll know with somebody, but like, really, we're in that part of the summer where I think it's easier to overthink things. So I think this episode's going to be good to get back to not just the basics, but the trends of Dynasty. We'll be talking a lot about age cliffs and talking about when you go after certain positions, how we overthink things. So should be a good episode. If you want to get all of our rankings, our startup rankings, they are in the Ultimate Draft Kit Plus. With the Dynasty Pass, we just updated teams, team opportunities. I mean, it's a living, breathing thing. We talk about that all the time. The Draft Analyzer, for those of you that want to look at your teams and kind of say, hey, here's where I'm weak, here's where I need some work in a Superflex team. We have that for you that's coming out July 1st. And that is another part of the summer that we get to kind of unveil something else. So the team is hard at work. The Draft Analyzer, that'll be out in just a week. So you can get that at ultimatedraftkit.com.
Also known as a couple days, Kyle.
In some parts of the world, it's a week, right?
No.
That's how time works.
In fact, none of them. You said it's the 28th?
Actually wrong.
Of June?
That's what they say.
Okay.
They do.
So that would make July 1st in a handful of days.
That's wild, though.
Boys, you know what I just realized? We decided to celebrate the birth of this great nation this weekend, 4th of July weekend, with the Draft Analyzer.
Yes.
Go us.
That's our marketing ploy, really, is just to get it as America.
Happy birthday, America.
Nothing's more American
than
than
analyzing
a draft analyzer. Yeah, I mean, that's what you want. That's what. Hey, sorry, honey, I can't really help with the kids. I got to figure out my tight end premium Superflex kicker league.
I got my own fireworks.
I got stuff to do. So yeah, you can get that at ultimatedraftkit.com. but we're going to jump into it.
Tips and tricks.
So in the Ultimate Draft Kit Plus, we have Ballers Dynasty tips if you want to get those. We're going to add on to that and count down from 10. Some tips that we think if you're in a startup, this is going to be helpful. This will also come out in an article format if you need to see that. If you like to read, if you're one of the kids that reads, you get those accelerated reader points. Or
trying to earn a personal pan pizza this summer.
A little book it.
Are you guys old enough for that?
Kids don't nowadays don't even know what that is. Yeah, that was incredible back in the day.
Yeah, well, I mean that it coincided with when Pizza Hut was the juggernaut. It was everything. Like it was truly a treat. Like you went, you had your game on Saturday, and then guess what? We're going to the Hut, and you actually would go to Pizza Hut, and you'd sit down and you'd eat inside, and it was incredible. And they would give away pan pizzas. They'd be encouraging the youth to read. I mean, where are the companies? Let's go. Let's get back on this American corporations. Let's get reading again.
They didn't realize the correlation, though, between reading and obesity. That at the same time, it would
because
encourage...
of all the pizza?
Because of all the pizza. The Pizza Hut. The scientists weren't ready for that. But, yeah, Book It's still a program, guys. Like, you can... I mean, if you guys want to, you want your kids to submit something, get those... Hey, kids, I want a pizza.
I can't believe Kyle's just definitely like every night forcing his kids to sit down and read. He's like, you need this book it. Meanwhile, he's like, I cannot wait for Pizza Hut on Saturday.
Because Kyle's like, I refuse to pay for another pizza until you kids earn your keep.
I mean, if there's free pizza out there, then I'm going to go
I'm going to eat it.
I'm going to start us off.
Number 10.
My first tip for startups is a really simple adage of situations change, but draft capital doesn't. I think in fantasy football, especially in redraft, we talk all the time when we're in the middle of the season, we're maneuvering that like, hey, all we care about is opportunity here and projectable opportunity. But the windows of opportunity in Dynasty, I think, are a lot smaller than people realize. When you're in a startup draft, you're often just looking at a player in terms of what's in front of you. This is the situation they're in, and it's hard to project 2 to 3 years out. Like we mentioned that all the time. We did an episode on Dynasty rankings and how you come up with your rankings. And honestly, you think about 2 to 3 year windows, but a lot of players that you think have that 2 to 3 year opportunity, it might just end up being this year that you have anything. So a wide receiver often will say, hey, there's no one else on the depth chart. The targets are going to go their way. Sometimes that means that there's going to be a team that just doesn't pass the ball very much, like Chicago. It's just not there. Like last year, you could have said Darnell Mooney is an amazing buy, amazing opportunity in Dynasty because there is literally no one else out there. I mean, it's Dante Pettis running out in the field. It's Chase Claypool trading a second-round pick for. I don't know why they did that. But players who looked all alone looked very attractive in startups. But I would just say often when we're giving ourselves a narrative about a player that isn't attached to their, talent and their draft capital, then we end up overvaluing immediate opportunity. When Elijah Mitchell last year, you'd say, okay, well, he put together a really good rookie year, but the draft capital said, and the history of the 49ers said, he's not going to be the dude forever. We brought up this argument on the main show about Dameon Pierce. Like, okay, well, it looks like he's the guy here, but a year from now, we could have a very different conversation after he was just drafted in the 4th round. So I just want to bring that up at the start. I know we're going to kind of talk more about individual situations, but when I'm looking in a startup draft and I'm looking at immediate opportunity with these players that we're still projecting, I tend to pass on them for known commodities. Even on a team that's like, hey, he's the wide receiver 2. I know this player is good. I can look at his metrics behind the scene and say this wide receiver 2 is good. Where, I don't know, a year ago, Nico Collins, you could have said, oh, he's the only guy there. Or Devin Duvernay, he's the only guy in Baltimore. And then
Duvernay.
Oh, I pulled a fast one on Schneider. I traded our development guy. I traded him Devin Duvernay in a second for James Conner, and Devin Duvernay just evaporated. I felt
Schneider,
like
what are you doing, man? Come on.
James Conner was hurt, and it felt really good. But my point is more of saying immediate opportunity is kind of a phantom task that you're just going to keep looking at as a startup draft, and often they are going to move on. So, Betz, I will let you go next.
Number 9.
Yeah, this is basically a quick follow-up to exactly what Kyle was talking about, where situations change, and therefore we should not be drafting players based off their situation or your own team needs. Meaning, I started with 3 or 4 wide receivers. Like, I have to take a running back here because we talk about it all the time. Like in rookie drafts especially, we advocate for best player available and using maybe a team need as a tiebreaker versus saying, like, I'm loaded at wide receiver. I'm going to pass on, whoever it is this year for a Michael Mayer or, whatever it is. Like, you wouldn't do that, right? You would take the best player available, and we should do the same thing in startups because the NFL changes so quickly. And I wanted to list just a couple examples of situations that seemed so good, exactly what we wanted to have happen, and it didn't work out. A few years ago, Lamar Miller is freed from Miami. He goes to Houston. We think, oh my gosh, this is perfect. He was the the running back 5, finishes the RB18 in his first season. Dynasty value sinks like a rock. Tevin Coleman, remember that with the Falcons finally, freed. He goes to San Francisco. He's going to be the dude. He's the RB36, and his dynasty value never recovers. We've got a bunch of recent examples of this too. Last year, Gabe Davis, he's the guy. He's going to be out there every route. Russell Wilson going to the Broncos, Cortland Sutton to the moon, right? Like, these situations happen all the time, and they happen the opposite way as well. Geno and Drew Lock go to Seattle. Russ leaves. We make fun of the Seahawks. All of us did in the offseason. And we faded DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, despite the fact that those guys are talented. They have proven it. We know they're talented. And we overvalue situation a lot when it comes to fantasy, and specifically when it comes to dynasty. So these situations change so much that I'm looking more at player archetypes, player ages, like Kyle said, drafting for talent. And then we're going to talk about later specifically what to look for at, running back, wide receiver, and contract situations as well. So draft best player available and the talent. Do not overvalue situation.
I'm finding, you brought up, a couple different examples. Like right now, who is the wide receiver 1 outside of Travis Kelce for Patrick Mahomes? It's like, I think most people would say Kadarius Toney. Like, just in terms of talent, you can make an argument for MVS, but we've been playing this guessing game for a while. Apart from Tyreek Hill, we haven't really known who that person is. And so it's easy to look at this, and say, this is just what I need to do. I need to be able to take the best player available over reaching on someone that I think could be the wide receiver 1, where Tony's range of outcomes in Dynasty is, I don't know, a year from now, like Toney could be somebody that's like just dragging on your bench. He could be somebody that's a wide receiver 2 for your team, but there's so many other players. Like in our startup draft, Toney went in like the 8th round, right around Tyler Lockett. Okay. Yes, there's a huge age discrepancy there, but I know Mike is grimacing. He's mad because when you hear something like that, it's like, I don't know what Toney is. I think he has a great situation, but Lockett seems like the much better player. Would you agree?
Yes, Tyler Lockett is sensational. And I would like to, let's just air some grievances here. Patrick Mahomes is simultaneously the greatest thing that has happened in fantasy football in a long time, and also the worst, because he is ruining everything of the way that we look at situations and we try and project which players are going to have a breakout, because the dude's out here throwing, close to 5,000 yards, 40 touchdowns, whatever it is, just on a regular basis, and yet we can't trust any of these players except for Travis Kelce. He's even ruined the running backs. Like Andy Reid, running backs were a surefire thing. We had a couple years where Kareem Hunt, it was all happening, and then he decided to be a dum-dum. But since then, like, it's all over the place. So it's really frustrating to see such a powerful offense that we have no real confidence in. This is not a dynasty tip. This is just Mike being mad at the Kansas City Chiefs. So thank you for listening. Welcome to my TED Talk.
We did a study a while back. I remember one year Andy was just like, please don't buy into Mecole Hardman, because for years and years and years, it was just like, well, it's Patrick Mahomes, so we got to find who the wide receiver 2 is. We got to find, and it was just years of Andy Reid's systems in the Chiefs that weren't producing. I mean, you get one Sammy Watkins week, right? We're guaranteed one of those, but just everyone else, you're just searching for it. So Could Tony be the answer? Maybe, but I think Betts' point is clear. Like in a startup, if you are projecting based on situation alone, then a lot of times you're going to be whiffing just terribly when you look back a year or two from now, as opposed to known commodities that I think that's kind of our strategy overall. That's not the sexiest thing. That I think the Ballers Dynasty strategy leans more towards veteran known commodities than shooting for the moon with some of these other ones. But Mike, I will let you go next.
Number 8.
I'm going to talk about wide receivers. The position, it is, in my opinion, the most important position in all of Dynasty because, number one, when they hit, they hit for a much longer time where a running back can give you literally one season. You push all your chips in on that guy, and then your heart is just simply broken. But wide receivers, usually when they hit and they have the draft capital and things like that, they're going to be around for a while. It's just this is what we need to be looking for. Having said that, there are ups and downs. There are some bumps and bruises that you have to take. We're a little spoiled recently because Justin Jefferson was not the consensus 101. I mean, I think he was taken like 106-ish or right around there. I mean, in that, because he was lumped in with this draft class of really heavy hitters at the wide receiver position, and you had to, of course, have to take your shots there. But that roulette wheel has what looked fantastic at the time. I think now, so we're Henry Ruggs is gone. Was
Jalen Reagor?
Jalen Reagor is like talking specifically. So Bet's talking about situation, right? You had all of these wide receivers go, and it was, well, how do you really rank these? Well, Jalen Reagor's got the best situation. He went to the Philadelphia Eagles, and they don't have a true number one wide receiver. Meanwhile, all the other guys that were drafted, like CeeDee Lamb was behind Amari Cooper. Justin Jefferson had Adam Thielen on the team, Adam Thielen was still a competent player at the time. So those things, look, they can cloud your judgment on just how good a player is when you go with the situation of the Philadelphia Eagles over Justin Jefferson's draft capital and his production profile. But there, like I said, there's going to be ups and downs because you get Jefferson, you got Jamar Chase. But when you've hit, you're locked in. Those guys are going to be the top two wide receivers for quite some time. But you gotta pan for some gold here because while you're doing that, you have Josh Doxson, N'Keal Harris, and Corey Coleman's lumped in there. But it is about the life cycle, and it's about knowing when to move on. When you have to take the swings. I'm not mocking anybody who took Jalen Reagor because your boy Mike took Jalen Reagor and got toasted, and that was after I hadn't learned my lesson from Josh Doxson because I took him too, and now I've taken Quentin Johnston. So everyone, when the triple TCU plane goes down in flames, just know that I'm the co-pilot on that machine there. But it's knowing when to move on from these players. If a wide receiver produces early, they generally continue to produce at a high level for multiple seasons. Since 2016, only 33% of wide receivers drafted in first round of the NFL draft were immediately a top 24 wide receiver in Dynasty ADP in year 2. 0 outside of that top 24 ever recovered and got back into the top 24. Dynasty is so much, it is a market. It is understanding the value of these players who can sustain value. Wide receivers, first-round wide receivers in after year 1, they frequently hold into year 2. But you got to know. You got to know after year 2 and make your move because they still might have value, but you got to know, bail out. Like we've talked about Sky Moore a lot on this, not a first-rounder, but Sky Moore's value is holding, even though it feels like it shouldn't. But just know that after year, if things are not going well halfway through this year, you better figure out a way to bail out of Sky Moore, who will still hold some value. So, and behind-the-scenes metrics that we talk about, like yards per route run, targets per route run, that type of stuff. If a rookie wide receiver posts a yards per route run below 0.8, that pretty much means that this player is doomed. This is Laquan Treadwell. This is John Ross and Kyle Borg.
No.
This is your boy Terrace Marshall, who the situation for Terrace Marshall is looking mighty fine. I would sell that situation personally if I had the option.
I've had so many people over the last day or two. There was some tweet PFF put out that he was like the highest graded wide receiver on go routes last year.
Oh, no.
Which it doesn't tell me a lot, but it's fun to throw out there. And so everyone's like, "Are you in? What's your best ball exposure?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm out." I'm looking at my database right now, and I'll give you some other wide receivers because the point Mike's making is it's tempting to buy a dip on some of these wide receivers that you think still have a window of hope in startup drafts. You're like, okay, well, Jalen Reagor. After year 1, you could get way cheaper in year 2. And you're like, okay, maybe this is it. Same thing with Terrace Marshall. My prior said, he had a great breakout age. He's big. He's still super young. And after doing nothing in year 1, hey, I still want to go after him. But it's kind of a fool's errand when you look at all the wide receivers that just post these numbers. So for instance, you loop in last year's prospects and you kind of get to just say, I'm out. Like David Bell was a player for the Browns that we thought, hey, he had an opportunity.
Third rounder, right?
Third rounder, yeah. 99th overall. And, 0.7 yards per route run. His target share was 7%. And you look at and see what the team did. It's like, you got to cut bait on players like that. Tyquan Thornton is a player that's really intriguing right now. And it looks like there's an opening. But you look, did he command targets last year? 11%. His yards per route run, 0.76.
Oh, no. But I thought I was in.
He's close. He's like on that fringe where you can make a case. But like the only player that's hit 0.8 or below that has come back to any relevance is Zay Jones. And I feel like that took like 5 years for him to come back to anything.
That took a long time because was he a second-round pick?
Yes,
by
he was
Buffalo?
Second-round pick. Buffalo, and then kind of, was a Raider for a while. He scooted around. So, like, Tyquan Thornton, let's just say, I don't know, I was in a startup draft, and I'm on the clock in the 17th round, which
speaking, of course.
I brought this up because I'm on the clock. Tyquan Thornton is my next in my queue, and I'm asking myself, at this point, the opportunity cost is so low, but based on what we're saying, like, this is cut bait time. Like, he's not worth it at all.
And so what do you think? And he's probably still holding a little bit of value. I know that, that 17th round or whatever in startup, that's not fantastic, but you could still, he would tantalize people. Second rounder, absolute burner. You have just another year in the system here for Mac Jones. I can sell the case for Tyquan Thornton, and I think Kyle's right that you might want to take some of these numbers and be willing, like, live with the results and trust your process. But the process is saying these are players that you got to get out of.
All right, so I'll give you 2 names. I'm on the clock, and then we'll move on. Tyquan Thornton or Khalil Shakir. Who would you rather have?
Ooh. I think
both situations both players, I should say, seem like low probability hits no matter what. And when that happens, I'm going to side with the guy catching passes from Josh Allen instead of Mac Jones.
Yeah, if Khalil Shakir, if he gets Isaiah McKenzie's role, that late in a dynasty, that has value.
All right, Khalil Shakir is going to be my pick, and we'll take a quick break.
Foot Clan, I want to make sure that you guys are prepped for draft season this year and that you are fully aware of what the fantasy footballers on our Dynasty show and what we do here as our main product. We have the Ultimate Draft Kit to make sure that you have absolutely everything you need to win at Dynasty Football. The UDK Plus, you can check it out at ultimatedraftkit.com. There you're going to find all of our startup rankings, all of our rookie rankings, all of our tools. This week in the Draft Analyzer is launching as well. It is every single thing that you need for the entire season to dominate in Dynasty fantasy football. It is proven accurate, and we pour our lives into this thing. We will always be updating it. It will be fresh. It will be current, and there is more information than you could possibly imagine. We want you to win, so check it out at ultimatedraftkit.com.
All right, we're back, and it's time for
number 7.
I want to talk about tight ends. And I've been using a lot of tight end puns recently on the show. I feel like they work. I feel like you were fine with shaking that tight end, Mike.
I was ashamed and embarrassed that you would bring a butt joke into such a prestigious and serious podcast like the Fantasy Footballers.
We did a segment in March, and it was about just some things to remember. And mine was called "Get Your Tight Ends Checked Out Early." That was like my Dynasty tip. So yeah, I mean, any proctology jokes that I can give on this podcast, I feel like work really well. This one won't be as punny, but tight end tiers are clear. That's my tip here, because tight ends can be really hard to find a breakout. But I think in startups, it's the easiest position to be able to assess where tiers are. Now, tiers in Dynasty are kind of tough. Like in the Ultimate Draft Kit, we have our tiers for redraft because you guys do real point projections that we can see. Tiers in Dynasty are a little bit more ambiguous. Like, is there a tier break between, I don't know, Dallas Goedert and TJ Hawkinson? You could make the case for either. Like, you could say, like, oh, he's in the elite tier, Dallas Goedert. So I think those are a little bit more ambiguous. But when you look at the ranks in the Ultimate Draft Kit Plus, I'm looking at Mike's ranks right now for tight ends, because I actually went through the three, and I'm not just kissing your butt here, tight end pun. Actually, I liked your tight end ranks the most, Mike.
Well,
like, I think when I drafted and I look at the startup draft that Betz and I did, it was really clear. The tiers that you had were Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, Travis Kelce in their own tier. And
sounds
you
right.
have those three in a super flex. You would be willing to take those in the first 3 rounds. And then it was really clear, like, you want to wait a little bit and scoop up some wide receiver values. And there's Dallas Goedert, George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson, Pat Freiermuth. And I noticed that you didn't overvalue what a lot of people think with rookie tight ends. So I think Dalton Kincaid's rank is in the top 100, but it's not overvaluing what we think he can be, because rookie tight ends, especially recently, haven't really worked out. Like, you look at the first round hit rates for, teams drafting tight ends, it's been really bad, right? Like OJ Howard, David Njoku, Evan Ingram, TJ Hawkinson, like players that we would say good NFL players, but not difference makers.
Noah Fant.
Yeah, it's like,
Wasn't he a first?
He was a first.
Whoopsies.
I think he was like 20th overall, but it's weird. What I find when I'm in a startup is I try to start a tight end positional run, and I don't want to chase them, because I think there's a lot more value when you get further down in drafts. If you miss out on the elite tier, that's okay. Like, I don't feel bad, because in Dynasty, I can pair 2 guys together that I think can have value and even bring in some youth. I found that the young athletic tight ends in startups tend to fall. So some guys that fell in the draft that Betz and I are in, it's a super flex. Greg Dulcich, 11th round. Chig Okonkwo, somebody took him in the 11th round, and it was me. But players like Chig, Trey McBride, Isaiah Likely are going in rounds 13, 14, 15. And if you missed out on tight end, you can kind of pair them together. So, like, for instance, I paired Chig Okonkwo and Trey McBride. In another league, it's Evan Ingram and Trey McBride. It's like, I feel totally fine in Dynasty. And you're not paying this crazy price for them at all. Like, you have your starters. In a super flex, I already had 3 quarterbacks before I got my tight ends. So the tight end position has the longest peak among all the positions. Like, you can get those tight ends to produce at elite levels at age 28, 29, the Kelce years in the 30. So for me, I think tight end is really, really simple, and you can see the breaks in our rankings, and you can see the breaks just on the board in general. So I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I think tight end is the least stressful in a draft, even if you miss out on an elite one for startups.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like there's always a couple options that are viable that you can talk yourself into, not even for this year. Like, you'll take a couple shots on guys and hope you hit on one. Like you mentioned, Trey McBride falls, like Cade Otton falls super far. Like, a lot of breakouts, and, we'll know whether or not these guys are going to be producers or not somewhat soon in their career. If it doesn't happen in the first 3-4 years, like, it's not happening most of the time, right? So I like, unless you're taking a win now approach, then I like taking late shots on young guys and hoping we hit one. And if you don't, you know what? The reality is these guys that are drafted as tight end 13, 14, 15 have just as good of a chance as finishing as a tight end 1 as like the tight end 9 in ADP, right? So I will take the discount. Similar, to redraft. We talk about that all the time. In Dynasty, I'm with you. I think taking some shots on these younger athletic tight ends, so you have to make sure that that's part of your process, that have draft capital is really what I look for. And then Kyle, you wrote that article about, identifying breakout tight ends in Dynasty, just looking at like, yards after the catch per reception, yards per route run, stuff like that. You want to make sure that you're identifying these guys that can actually create when given the opportunity, and not just oh boy, man, I hope I get these 25 yards and he falls in the end zone this week, because we all know that is not very fun in fantasy.
Yeah, you also get to find a lot of late bloomers, like the Juwan Johnson types. It's just the dude's athletic, and so when the ball's in his hands, he can do stuff. So, like, I got Darren Waller after a startup, before he was, anything in the league. Like, he was out of the league for a while. He was a Raven. He was drafted as a Raven. Then he was out of the league. And it was one of those players where it's like, I get to scoop him up later. Now, Darren Waller's kind of an out there case.
That's an outlier case, yeah.
But I just wanted to brag about it. But it's the young athletic guys that I like targeting if I miss out on the leap. But yeah, it's an article on the site. How do we identify breakout tight ends in Dynasty? If you want to check that out, you can do that on the site. All right, next one up.
Number 6.
Alrighty, from the boring tight ends to one of my favorite positions in fantasy, the running backs, which, man, they lose value quickly, and that's the take-home point here. I went back to 2020, 2021, and then last year, 2022, startup ADP. This is from myfantasyleague.com. This is your vanilla one-quarterback, 12-team leagues. And basically, here's what I found for running backs that were selected in the first round. So they had a top 12 ADP overall. These were the players that the market identified as the best dynasty running backs, the ones that you have to take early, that are likely to be your starter for the next 3-ish years, I think most people would say. 5 out of 8 in 2020 startup ADP lost value the following year. 7 out of 9 in 2021 lost value the following year, based off ADP in startups. 2022, 7 out of 7. Every running back that went in round 1 lost value the following year. So when you are selecting in round 1, in round 2, these high value draft picks in a dynasty startup, that if you get them wrong, your team could be in trouble for a couple of years. I am almost always shying away from running back in these scenarios, unless someone falls, farther than I think they should, because the running back landscape changes so quickly in the NFL. Not just, maybe in a year or two, like it'll be different. Like it's literally month by month, like things change so much because of injuries. Playing time is not secure for a lot of these guys. We're seeing issues with guys signing contracts. Saquon can't get paid. Josh Jacobs can't get paid, right? And those guys are the best backs in the league. So the NFL is telling us it's a devalued position. We need them to win in Dynasty, so it's a very tricky conversation. But when you're talking about startup and building a foundation, I'm almost going, a super flex, an elite quarterback, or in a one quarterback league, one of these elite wide receivers. So I wanted to turn our attention to the 2023 startup ADP currently going on right now. The market is getting a little smarter because you don't have as many in the top 12 picks. So I expanded it to the top 20 so we could get a better sample size here. But man, there's running backs here that I feel very worried about their value when you're talking about trade, ability to trade them at a high value, ability for them to be in your starting lineup in 2 years. Bijan Robinson obviously is, in the discussion for the 1.01 at running backs, but then it's guys like Jonathan Taylor is still going 7th overall. Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall's coming off major injury. Saquon Barkley has no contract security. Austin Eckler is older. Like these are all top 20 startup picks right now in one quarterback leagues on myfantasyleague.com. What do you guys think? I mean, Jonathan Taylor seems like a sketchy startup pick right now at his price.
Yep, I totally agree. We've talked about, the effect that a mobile quarterback has on their running back, the effect that a rookie quarterback has on your running back, and in the Indianapolis Colts have decided to combine those two things for Anthony Richardson. He's the future of the Colts, at least for the next few years. And Jonathan Taylor he's very good. He is a good player, but this is the market. The chance that I see that Jonathan Taylor becomes one of these running backs who's in the first round of Dynasty startups that loses value, I would put my chips on that side of the bet. Still great, still very valuable for fantasy football, but when you're looking at the market, I do think that he is going to lose value. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, he's old. Austin Eckler, he's old. I mean, Bijan, you feel pretty secure about, but I the way when you were talking about it, Betz, I had kind of had the idea of like, if I'm building my life, right, which fantasy is life, I'm building my life. My wide receivers are my house. This is where I want my money to go because this is where I am most of the time. I'm putting the money in the house. My house is going to gain value. It should theoretically gain value over the course of the years. That's kind of been the way that America has worked. Your house value, it simply goes up. And then your running backs, that's your automobile. That is your car. You have to have one. At least, look, I'm a suburban living type of feller. I'm not in the city where I can just take public transportation. You got to have a car out here. But the second you take that car off the lot, boom, you've already lost whatever, like 15% of what you just paid for that car. So don't take your high equity and put it into the car. Put it into the house. Get your wide receivers. Make that a strong foundation. And then when that's all set, then go splurge on the car.
We will be selling our financial package later if you need to. But
UDK++.
I mean, that's the insider stuff. But
that was so good, Mike. I love that analogy.
I'm looking at the startup that Betz and I are in the middle of.
People buying cars in the first round.
You know, Bijan went at the end of the first round, and I totally get that. But you look at kind of where some of the other running backs are, and you have to ask the question, the stats that Betz gave, like, hey, you know, more than half of these early running backs will lose their value a year from now. I mean, I did a study one time where it was like, okay, here's over the last 10 years who were going in Dynasty, and you could just guarantee a year or two later, their value is just going to plummet. You know, like the Eddie Lacy years. It's just like these guys, Todd Gurley fell off a cliff, and we've talked about that tons of times. So I think you asked who are we most worried? Saquon scares me. Saquon scares me. I know he'll get a second contract apart from injury, but what team is it with? Like if it's not with the Giants and if it's with a team like the Texans, are you going to get 1 year and then just be like, I'm holding the bag at a player who's super talented, but in a bad situation like age 27. So Saquon scares the life out of me and somebody that I've passed over in startups just because I'm not willing to give that type of equity, like top 2 or 3 round equity for Saquon just feels a bit too rich for me.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Betz, any other names that scare you?
Yeah, Saquon makes sense. I mean, Christian McCaffrey right now as a first round startup pick, look, when he's on the field, he's incredible, but we're going to talk about it in a minute. You know, when we get back to my tip, the running back age clip is obvious, and there's a ton of data that says these running backs are more likely to produce when they're younger. We see that year after year after year. So, you know, there's a reason people are a little worried about Derrick Henry this year. Christian McCaffrey isn't the youngest guy in the world. I know he's got the contract situation, but I can't fathom right now drafting Christian McCaffrey as my first player of a startup over Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave. I mean, you name it. I would take all those guys ahead of Christian McCaffrey.
Number 5.
All right. If you are new to Dynasty, this is just, and we get this question, I mean, very frequently because more and more people are getting to Dynasty, which welcome aboard. It's extremely fun. But when you're staring down your first Dynasty draft, it can be very intimidating of where do you go? And I think this is like, this might be my number one tip. Play to win right now. Like when you're in the startup, don't be dumb with your picks and take really old running backs with your first or second round pick, but don't overvalue young players who have not proven it. Dynasty managers, they chase what they don't know. We like talking about the shiny new toy, the unknown upside versus what this player is giving us. Kyle just gave us, what was the Lockett and Tony? Like, come on now. Tyler Lockett, he's a bit older. He doesn't have forever left in the league, but he still has a few years. Meanwhile, Kadarius Toney has like a handful of receptions for his entire career. And here's Tyler Lockett, who's just a perennial top 15 fantasy wide receiver. Play to win right now. You can speculate about the young guys all off season. It's very fun. But the biggest predictor of future success, it's a vicious cycle because it is past success. And like, just let a player tells you who they are. They know if they're good. This was the approach that Jason and I took in the Dino Junior, the champ league, as we go for our 4th consecutive championship. We went Devante Adams, Mike Evans, Travis Kelce, Robert Woods, which this was, back when Robert Woods was in his prime. And then who did we get with our 5th pick? Derrick Henry. Like, it can be done. You can build the foundation of your house and then get your car later on. You don't have to do it in the first round. You can find guys. Just know where the market is and know where the market is going. And looking at, some situations here. We have Dak Prescott. He's going to be 30 years old, but he has proven that he is a good quarterback. Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, new hotness, number 1, number 2 overall picks. Are they going to be good? I think so. But the voice going up says, I'm not 100% sure. The NFL teams are betting on it, but NFL teams bet on these young quarterbacks all the time, and it doesn't always pan out. At the wide receiver position, Chris Godwin, he's 27. He's still in the age where things can be fantastic for him. But the unknowns of Jamison Williams, Zay Flowers, it's too alluring for a lot of people. You're seeing them drafted in front of Chris Godwin. Deontay Johnson, it was a down season. He can bounce back. But Jonathan Mingo, George Pickens, over this guy who's just seeing an elite target share year after year after year. So just don't overvalue the youth. They have their place and their time in the startup draft. But don't just load up only on young players and say, I'm going to be bad this year. I'll probably be bad next year. But then in year 3, that's going to be my time to shine. I will have a true dynasty in the Dynasty League. And then you're going to have someone else in the league who's drafting really solid veterans and pulling off championship after championship. And then you're just looking in the mirror going, no, next year is going to be my year. And it won't. It will never be your year. Play to win. Don't overvalue youth.
I just want to say this about that startup because I'm in that league and I won the championship that first year. No big deal. But your team is annoying for a couple of reasons. Because when you drafted those players, we have this in the doc, like from the original draft that we did, this was 2018 for that league. All those players were entering year 4 or later. So like you weren't getting anybody that you said, hey, this breakout could happen. Like you drafted players in a 1-quarterback dynasty league that you said, I believe in, and I think they're established, and you just didn't reach for anyone. Now, I'm not going to show you the rest of the draft because we all made mistakes.
Well, yeah.
My startup is terrible. It might be the worst of any I've ever seen, but I somehow maneuvered to win that championship that first year. But I like what you did.
They can't take it away. You cannot take away your championship.
That's right. The Borgononis Jabronis, original champs. But you've gotten to ride these players out, and then you are about to die on this hill. You are about to die with these players.
That is correct. We're starting to build up our youth a little bit more here. But again, it's just greatness cannot be taken away. Championships are for if you win a championship and then your team is down in the mucky muck for 2, even 3 years, you still won, which you're going to take a look around your league, right? Your whatever it is, your redraft, your dynasty. Look how long it's been going, 5 years, 10 years. There's going to be teams in that league who have never won, ever. They will have it like in a 10-year league. Our league of record, which is our most important league, we have guys in this league who've been in it for, 10 plus years. They've never won. It's
Mike's
just
Duncan.
Well, it's just to point out that when you get the championship, it's extremely difficult. So don't just keep putting it off till tomorrow when you can get something like that today. And then it's everything. That's what you play, or like that's the end goal of the season is I want to win a championship. I want to be one of the teams that has done it. and is brutal when you're just you're building over and over for the future, and that future never comes because sometimes you gotta be in the present.
Yeah. Betz, I don't know if you play this way. So like my weakness sometimes in startups is I want the best of both worlds. No, that's an Andy thing. Mine is I'm like I have a real Hannah Montana situation. Like I want the best of both worlds, and because of that, I end up drafting players that can help me win now. But then I'm like I'm still tempted to also add some players who are youthful, and so you end up being caught in the middle because you want your team to be able to hit both. And I think what Mike's saying is like the goal is to win, and if you win, then that's what you want. And if you have to rebuild, you can. But I think a lot of people just end up in the middle. So do you have a certain style that you have in Dynasty?
I mean, I'm usually trying to take that approach in a startup. And like Mike said, being smart, not just saying like, look at this team, it's full of all 30-year-olds. Like this is going to be great for 1 year and then literally be terrible. No, of course not. But like you said, in the middle rounds, I feel like that's really where it happens, where you see this year's rookie class in a startup. You see guys that are hanging on for value from last year. I feel bad because we keep bringing this up, but Sky Moore, those guys, like they're hanging on for dear life. And you're like, well, I can see the case. Like my team could use some youth. I'll pass on, a solid wide receiver 3 for my team and I'll take the shot. I would just rather take the guy that I know is a good player. And look, we talk about this all the time on this show. Dynasty is a fallacy. It's not a thing. Like we don't know what's happening in the NFL in 3 months. We're trying to predict. We're going to get a lot of stuff wrong. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. So I am trying to play for now. I'm trying to win. And I just want to give a shout out to Mike and his Herm Edwards impression there. You play to win the game. That's what I felt like listening to the entire time.
That's great stuff. Wasn't he in Arizona like for a little bit?
ASU, I believe.
Okay.
I don't think
that rant though came when he was with the Jets.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think the ASU time went that great. I think he's gone now. I don't know.
Didn't go so well.
Number 4.
All right, so if you're in a startup, I want to talk to you about pick trading because it has its ups and it has its downs. Trading in general, hopefully, operates under the premise that this is actually good for your team, right? Like you're not going to make a trade just to make a trade. Although I think Dynasty in general, people just want to make a trade just so they can.
Yeah, it's fun.
It is fun. I get it. But in a startup draft specifically, the drop-off is what we need to highlight here. Like the drop-off is pretty significant, especially if you're in a Superflex league. So like the Betz and I are in a draft right now, and I'll give you a scenario in a second, but I was picking from the 108, Betz is from the 103, and we had a third round reversal. So, I had my third round pick before he did, but when I'm looking at the draft board, and we'll post some of this, it's interesting that once I got to about pick 15 or 16, there's a major drop off, not just in quarterbacks, but just in talent as a whole, what you're doing at wide receiver position. So we need to realize that if you're going to make a trade, you need to look at the board and look at what league you're in. If it's a 1 quarterback league, I would put that more at like top 36 players, like the first 3 rounds, maybe top 40. After that, it's a little different. And you and Jason in that startup actually got an extra player in that range.
Yes.
And you sacrificed some picks later because the later picks, especially in a 1 quarterback, are just worthless. But once you start getting way late, past 12, I don't care anymore. I really just don't care about what those picks are. So willing to trade those, but I want to give some scenarios because if you're moving up in a draft, if you're in a super flex, you should only move up if you're trying to get an elite quarterback or an elite young wide receiver. That's already elite, not a wide receiver that you think could make it. Like, I'm not moving up to get Treylon Burks because I think he could be great. He could. I'm moving up for a Garrett Wilson that I've seen be great, or Chris Olave. That's kind of like the big difference, or an elite quarterback. If you want to trade, and get 3 picks in the first, 15 to 20, I say go for that in a super flex because you're getting your elite quarterback and you're getting maybe 2 young studs to pair with them. I feel totally fine with that. But like we always say in trading, make sure you put names to those picks or else it will feel really scary. So Betz and I were talking earlier. I had the 108. He was drafted from the 103. At the 108, I took Jamar Chase. Okay, so the quarterbacks had kind of run in Superflex, and I took Chase actually ahead of Jefferson, which I think it's a coin flip anyways. But I took Chase. Betz, if he wanted to move up to the 108, I'm going to make sure that Betz just pays out the wazoo to me. Like, there's just no way I'm giving up that elite of a pick at all.
There's a lot of money in a wazoo.
That's the goal.
That's why you make people pay from there.
It's a money-making scheme, the wazoo. So I would want to be overwhelmed. So Betz, you took Jalen Hurts to the 103, which made a lot of sense. If you wanted to move up to the 108, what's your offer in a startup? Because that is a really valuable pick for my team. So what kind of offer would you make?
Yeah, I mean, a realistic offer, I think, would be that second-round pick, your third-round pick, and then I said something like a sixth. And honestly, you might have to put in a future first or something like that, because when you put names to it,
yes,
what it turned out to be was T. Higgins, Mark Andrews, Juwan Johnson. There are some people that might make that trade for Jamar Chase. I would not. Jamar Chase is an untouchable, in my opinion. I think a lot of us agree on that. So when you put names to it, you really understand, like, you have to give up so much to go up. And if you're going to move back, make that person overpay. Like, sometimes it's not even worth it if they do. Like, I'll see stuff on Twitter where they'll ask, hey, I got offered for my first round pick, his third, fourth, and fifth. You're like, dude, look at who's available in the ADP, or looking where you're drafting. If you're on Sleeper, look in the app and see who's going to be available in those picks, because it's usually not worth it. Like, you're getting, 3/4 and it doesn't equal $1, right? Like, it's usually not worth it. So make sure you're overpaying, or getting your league mates to overpay, I should say, if you're moving back.
And we say that all the time with rookie picks. Like, when we were talking about rookie drafts earlier, like in May, it's like, please put a name with this pick. Like, don't tell me it's, would you do the 110 for this? It's like, okay, who would you take at 110? Who do you think will be available there? And so I like this exercise, because I had asked myself, would I be willing to give up Jamar Chase for a downgrade at the same team, T. Higgins, who we think will be a part of that team, Mark Andrews, and Juwan Johnson? And I think that's a good offer.
Yeah, it's pretty strong.
But Jamar Chase is so valuable to me. So before I even put those names to it, I might counter back and say, okay, I might want a rookie pick, or we might do a swap later, because it's so valuable. The first 15 picks in a super flex are super valuable, and the top 40 in one quarterback league. So last thing I'll say about trading is we tend to value the unknown a lot in startups. You want to trade as if you are right. Do not trade for a player that you think will still be a projection. You want hits, okay? And I would say those players that you offered, in a deal you wouldn't have offered like the names of the players, but when we put them to there, those feel like very solid players, like Mark Andrews, our tight end 1, T. Higgins, who we have as a top 12 wide receiver in Dynasty, Juwan Johnson, who we're really high on. So I think that's a fair offer, but I'm going to turn you down, Betz, because I don't care. I'm not giving up Jamar Chase, despite it being in a mock draft.
Number 3.
Kyle's just he's on one today. I'll tell you what, Mike, he's feeling it on the show today. He's just so proud of himself, bragging left and right.
From my mock.
He got Jamar Chase
from your mock
for
draft.
his fake league. His fake league about fake football.
But Jamar Chase and Chris Olave for my fake league.
For the record,
it is.
Kyle's gonna. I'll tell you what. At the end of this, Kyle's gonna be like, "Hey guys, do you want to just like turn this into a real league?" Based off how this went for me. All right, my last tip here is to be aware of age cliffs, and specifically when historically we see players decline at each position: running back, wide receiver, and tight end. And yes, there are going to be outliers. There's going to be a Derrick Henry. There's going to be a Travis Kelce who for some reason just doesn't slow down. But a lot of players are not that, right? And so what I want to point to is just understanding when you're selecting a player, how many years in theory do we have left of them at value before they are going to start to lose value over the course of time? For running backs, we tend to see right around age 27, right around age 28, year 6 to 7 in the NFL, there's a pretty steep decline, and then after that, it falls off a cliff. Wide receivers, it's right around year 7, year 8 in the NFL. That's when the start of the decline happened. Doesn't mean they're bad players, but then by year 10, falling off a cliff. Think of guys like Adam Thielen. Tight ends, year 7 to 8, similar, to wide receivers, these pass catchers. There are ones that hold their value a little longer, but right around 7 to 8 years in the NFL is when we start to see the trend where it happens. Again, doesn't mean that they're just done. It just means we've seen the best from them, most likely. across a large enough sample size. So I just wanted to put some names to it for running backs, guys that are entering year 7. This is the 2017 class that was just loaded. Guys like Eckler, Kamara, CMC, Aaron Jones, James Conner, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, and Playoff Lenny, a.k.a. Lombardi Lenny, a.k.a. Unemployed Lenny, is also part of this list. At wide receivers, these are some studs, right? Devante Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, Brandon Cooks. And then for tight ends, David Njoku, Evan Ingram, Gerald Everett, George Kittle. That's a lot of good players, man. But the data tells us that those players are going to lose value over the next year or two. So my question to you two, you can pick any position you want. Which player are you most worried about losing their value and falling off a cliff soon? And I will say we probably can't include Leonard Fournette or Dalvin Cook since they don't have teams. But, among those players, who worries you guys?
It's also, I was thinking about this through the lens of what you do at the startup draft, and then is this player going to hold value where you could even trade them, later on? But man, I'm worried about Devante Adams because in our startup, he went in the 4th round at the 402, and at 30.5 with changing quarterback and seems a bit cranky at the team. How much time do we have left with him? At being an elite player, when I look at all my per route metrics, everything else, still killing it. Obviously the long touchdowns last year, I think aren't repeatable, but Devante Adams is one of those players where would you rather have Devante Adams or DK Metcalf in a startup?
Oh, that's a good question.
They went back to back, which is why I thought it was interesting.
I think I'd lean Metcalf personally.
Man, I think
you took Metcalf bets right after Devante Adams, so I'm proud of you. So proud of you.
Which I would have done if I was the pick earlier. I'll just say that for the record.
Yeah, let me give you another name: Devante Adams or Drake London.
Oh my gosh.
I think I'd take Drake London.
Yeah, I think I'd go London.
That's just a massive age difference.
That's one of those, that's putting to the test, known, proven commodities. And that one feels really extreme because London is incredibly young and we loved what he did in terms of target share and just dominating things. But, oh man,
let me give you a name though, when you talk about that. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but there was a point in Julio Jones' career where he was 29, 30 years old and you were like, it's Julio, man. He's still going to be good for another 2 years. Spoiler, he was not good for another 2 years.
How dare you?
It happened very quickly. And listen, he changed
Betsy,
teams.
Do you think that his injuries and stuff factored into that?
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
Because Julio Jones is always getting hurt, and Devante Adams has been pretty much an Iron Man. I feel like the only injuries I can remember was that the horrifying concussion years ago against the Bears. But other than that, Adams.
He also had that big toe injury from a couple years ago, 3 or 4 years ago maybe. He missed 6, 7, 8 games. But yeah, he's been incredibly durable in his NFL career.
Just because you guys brought that up, I'm going to go scoop up Julio Jones on a Dynasty waiver from a waiver wire just so I can say I had him on my team at one point. Because it's sad when you see players like that. It will happen with Devante Adams. The question is,
AJ
startup,
Green too.
Oh, AJ Green. And then when you had AJ Green on your roster, you're like, I feel like this is dead weight. I don't even want to start him at all. So yeah, just keep that in mind with certain players. We have all their ages in the Ultimate Draft Kit if you want to look at that. Mike?
Number 2.
In a 1-quarterback league, do not ignore the veteran quarterbacks because these guys are going to plummet. You're going to see incredible quarterbacks available in the double-digit rounds, and it's pretty wild. The talk about the quarterback life cycle for fantasy. Look, it's completely different than any of the other positions. Over the last 20 years, the percent of top 12 seasons by age, we'll put them into buckets here. So the young guns, age 22 to 28. Over the past 20 years, they represented 45% of the top 12 seasons. Ages 29 to 35, they represented 43.5%. So, basically equal here, young guys and old guys. And top 12 may not be a difference-making quarterback. We know that. The guy who finishes at 12 compared to the person who's finishing, at 4 or 5, it's a big difference. Well, same sample size over the last 20 years. The percent of top 3 seasons by those same age buckets. The young guns, they have the edge. So young guns, again, 22 to 28, 48% of the top 3 finishes. But the old farts are coming in, man. 29, 35, 44% of the top 3 seasons. I mean, I'm sure that Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady are having something to say about this, but the point being, these guys are available. Veteran quarterbacks who are going past pick 90 right now. Kyler Murray, which I get it because of the injury, but when Kyler Murray's been on the field, he has been truly elite for fantasy football. You got Tua, you got Geno Smith, Russell Wilson, Daniel Jones. These guys are all going after pick 130, and they're going to have value. Back in the Dynasty League, the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty League, I drafted Kirk Cousins in round, I don't remember, 14 or 15. Kirk, and this was, 2016, 2017. Kirk Cousins is still on my team, guys. He is still there. He is still giving me value, and I got him crazy late back then. So these guys will be available. When we were talking about Dynasty, I remember, years ago, guys, Phillip Rivers, Drew Brees, Big Ben, these guys still have multiple years left. They don't have it's not like drafting Trevor Lawrence where you're like, yeah, this guy's going to be my dude for 10 years, Joe Burrow. But they still have value, and injuries happen. You got to have some depth at the quarterback position, and it is waiting for you. So I think part of that tip is saying you don't have to go crazy with drafting young quarterbacks in the early rounds. Get one of them, but then know that there's going to be a veteran or two that you should pair, and they're going to be available super late. And the chance of them providing value for your team compared to a wide receiver or a running back that you're taking in at pick 156 or 162, Geno Smith is going to slide right in for a whole season for you. You're going to be able to play him. The wide receiver you take at 156, he's probably going to be on the waiver wire at next year's rookie draft.
In one quarterback leagues, you think about the people that have the elite quarterbacks there. They have the Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. When it comes time to their rookie draft the next year, they're not spending capital on Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. So it's actually really easy, like Mike's saying, if you had somebody like Kirk Cousins or, Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith, these players that are getting up there, then those quarterbacks tend to slide in your rookie drafts and you get to take shots in them there to pair. So it's your startup quarterback is not going to be your quarterback forever, but because of the age longevity of the position, and like Mike mentioned, they're giving very similar production to the young guys, you can pair a young guy in the draft. So at your startup, I think it's okay if you miss out, if you want to get one of those guys like Mike mentioned near, pick 100 or later. And then the next year, those people with elite quarterbacks probably aren't drafting CJ Stroud at all. They're I need to load up somewhere else. I don't need a quarterback. It's just a one quarterback. And you can kind of pair. So it's kind of an interesting dance that you get to do.
You keep yourself afloat. You tread water and let these late round quarterbacks, these veteran guys, give you the value that you need while you're trying to find your own elite one. And I think that's I think that's the way to go. And we're talking one quarterback. But I think it's the way to go of get that veteran guy while you try and get the elite player before they're elite. That's kind of the thing about what has made Josh Allen. I mean, even Joe Burrow is in there because Joe Burrow was going at the end of the first round in rookie drafts. Josh Allen was going in the second or the third. I mean, because the NFL appropriately, most people didn't believe in him. And it just took, the biggest turnaround in quarterback history for him to become who he is. But Jalen Hurts was the last pick at the end of the third round in our rookie draft because he was a second rounder behind Carson Wentz. Tread water and then find these elite quarterbacks before they are elite so they're cheaper for you.
Number 1.
All right, his final tip is there's nothing worse than being in a dynasty league that is not enjoyable or competitive. Okay, so it's one thing to be in a redraft league and to say to yourself, hey, we've got some deadweight managers that just don't want to set their lineups. Dynasty is way worse because it's not only just a giant pool of players, but it's supposed to be a format that works alongside whatever else you're doing, and it's supposed to be for degenerate people that love this. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you're knee-deep in stuff. It's June, And our big news this week was, I don't know, like what news do we have that we're like, oh, Puka Nacua. Puka is like the guy that we need to target for the Rams. That's our big news today.
And we love it.
You don't believe in it, Kyle? Come on.
Oh, I've already scooped him up. You remember like a month or two ago? He was like one of my nasty boys. I was like, let's go for it. So our tip is find a legit league. And the best way to do that is on Foot Clan Leagues. Our Dynasty channels in our Discord are by far the most popular and active right now. Every single day, I get to log in our Discord and find people that are just crazy about Dynasty. There's a whole Superflex channel that's how I found people for this startup draft, was just people said, hey, do you want to be in this draft? We're going to talk about it on the podcast. So it's just really easy. And I'll give a little shout out. I asked that channel, I said, hey, is there any leagues that have formed that are just, that you guys love? And shout out to the Toe Clan Dynasty League.
Yeah, I see what they did.
Yep. They said they formed it from super active members on Discord, and they made it really their own. It's a Dynasty best ball, so it takes the best scores, but there's trades and waiver wire. Like, they made it their own, and it's free for them. So you have a money league, whatever you want, but theirs is free. And they just said, like, we have our own Discord for that league. Like, they created it, and it's just their own world. They've gotten to know each other. There's rules, discussions, all the stuff. And they said it's by far the most fun league I've been a part of. So if you want to start new leagues, like, start with people that are actually wanting to get in and are going to be just like you. Maybe they don't live in the same area, but Foot Clan Leagues, we've had a lot of people. We've never had a marriage though yet, right, Mike? Two people met there.
We haven't heard about it yet. I'm sure there's been dozens. They just haven't reported it.
Underground weddings.
Like, this is this is a life tip. When you become an adult and you're not at school every day, making new friends is very, very difficult. And so why not find people who are passionate about the same things that the hobbies that you're passionate about? And so we've set that up for people at footclanleagues.com, which is part of the Discord. So I mean, look, it's tough to find those things, but when you find the right one, you make your own Discord here, like the Toe League or whatever, and you have and you make some new friendships. So get out there and find a friend.
All right, last segment.
Take it or leave it.
Let's give a parting shot here. I've said there's a lack of news, but rookies, specifically in Dynasty, we'll take anything we can get. Anything to confirm our priors or to tell us, fade this person. So, Betz, why don't you hit me with one rookie offseason news that's kind of on your mind right now?
Yeah, let's talk about the Giants wide receivers, which I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen, but Jalen Hyatt has been reportedly running with the third-team offense in OTAs and minicamp, and that's not great, Bob.
No,
because he was a guy that we talked about being worried about and saying, like, maybe he sneaks into round one of the NFL draft, maybe round two, and the NFL seemed to tell us what they think of a player like that who fell to the third round. So the fact that that's already happening gives me some pause and some concern. And the fact that's happening with Sterling Shepard and Wan'Dale Robinson not back to 100% yet, like Wan'Dale's not even running routes yet. He still can't get in with the second team or first team offense. Maybe it's a philosophy they have with rookies or something. I don't know, but that just adds more doubt to the fact that Jalen Hyatt is going to hit in year one, and we know what that does for dynasty value.
That just pains me because I spent so much time researching what high school he went to and everything in our pre-draft process, and it's like I can just throw that away.
You'll never get that time back, Kyle.
The Dutch Fork Silver Foxes. That was.
And he was incredible in high school. I mean, the film was just top notch.
Man, who cares anymore? No, but it's not a great sign. Mike, who you got?
Mine is more of just like we said, like the lack of news. And speaking of guys who are high draft capital that I have not heard a peep about, Jaden Reed was drafted by the Green Bay Packers. I don't know that I've seen a single blurb on him that has made any type of noise. It's been all Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs having, especially Romeo Doubs is building that hype machine again. Josh Downs, who the Colts were very excited to draft. Like, it's interesting to me that at this time of the year, positive puff pieces should only be used to confirm your priors, like Kyle said. When you got a guy on your team and you see something positive, be super excited about it. Go tell the whole league how great your draft pick was. That's part of the fun of fantasy football. But negative news or no news is much, much louder than a positive piece at this point of the offseason. So I'm a little surprised that there's a lot of these rookies that we are not hearing anything about. It's not training camp time yet, but we had rookie OTAs, you had mandatory workouts and things like that. So I'm a little surprised I haven't heard about those guys at all.
Yeah, there's a little bit about Dobbs playing in the slot, but it was like not about Reed separating himself at all. So
right.
It's like, it's not great. It's not great for small slot only wide receivers who aren't really getting on the field at all. I want to throw out really quick Israel Abanikanda, because the news we're getting.
Abanikanda, don't.
We're getting news, whatever news this is, somebody just writing it for fun, but it's from The Athletic that the Jets really do believe in his ability to contribute right away, which you could read into that a lot of different ways. Like, good, they drafted him. He should be out on the field. Imagine telling somebody that, like in like any job, like, hey, this person we just hired, we think they're going to do their job. But I think it's more saying, so Bam Knight's actually been hurt. That is a piece of news that we've had recently. So if there is room for somebody to get early, work in the season, usually we think of running backs kind of progressing later on. That's what we got with Tyler Algier last year, where they went with the veterans first, and then the 5th round rookie, they kind of slowly eased in. I think Abanikanda is talented enough. He was super young when we, profiled him earlier in the process before the draft. Like, we loved his tape and we liked that he was explosive. So if he can get out on the field, maybe even just siphon away some touches, that's a really good sign for him in future kind of dynasty outlook. So I'm buying it, at least that he can be the number 2 on this team. And I just want to be able to use that drop whenever we can. So,
oh, yes, absolutely. He's a very talented player. Again, we're going to be keeping our eyes and ears open of, is the running back position, is it changing as the NFL changes how they value these players? But you bringing up Tyler Algier and talking about the Jets and not mentioning Michael Carter's name, it's just another huge red flag. Team Dameon Pierce, like your player, enjoy him, and take that victory, but be careful, because the Michael Carter people, they were taking their victories, and then he got replaced immediately by Breece Hall. The Tyler Algier people, which I was a part of that crew, we were taking our victory laps at the end of the season, only to see a top 10 pick spent on a running back. Again, enjoy your wins, but be careful with these later round running backs, because they evaporate. I
would never, on a podcast, I would never victory lap Dameon Pierce. I hope the best for that guy. I hope he just does so well. He gets a second contract.
I will say,
happy for him.
I haven't seen Kyle happier than week 2, the week 1 recap show that we did for DFS. I've never seen Kyle happier, okay? Then when Rex Burkhead was out there as the starter in week 1, Kyle was like, I don't know if there's anyone that told you might be a bad play this week. But I'm just saying.
For DFS, it's obviously a different conversation, different context. But it was Rex Burkhead is the guy. And I know Mike's team Rex for life. So
for life.
Dude, sexy Rexies.
Yeah.
Always our dude. All right, that's going to do it for this podcast. Next week, we will start talking rankings for Dynasty. Check out everything in the Ultimate Draft Kit, ultimatedraftkit.com.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your Dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.